The first reading is from the 3rd chapter of Lamentations, beginning at the 22nd verse. The steadfast love of the Lord never ceases. His mercies never come to an end. They are new every morning. Great is your faithfulness. The Lord is my portion, says my soul. Therefore, I will hope in him. The Lord is good to those who wait for him, to the soul that seeks him. It is good that one should wait quietly for the salvation of the Lord. It is good for one to bear the yoke in youth, to sit alone in silence when the Lord has imposed it, to put one's mouth to the dust. There may yet be hope. To give one's cheek to the smiter and be filled with insults. For the Lord will not reject forever, although he causes grief. He will have compassion according to the abundance of his steadfast love, for he does not willingly afflict or grieve anyone. The word of the Lord.
Thanks be to God.
Let us read Psalm 30 responsively. I will exalt you, O Lord, because you have lifted me up and have not let my enemies triumph over me.
O Lord my God, I cried out to you, and you restored me to health.
You brought me up, O Lord, from the dead. You restored my life as I was going down to the grave.
Sing praise to the Lord, all you faithful. Give thanks and holy remembrance.
God's wrath is short. God's favor lasts a lifetime. Weeping spends the night, but joy comes in the morning.
While I felt secure, I said, I shall never be disturbed.
You, Lord, with your favor, made me as strong as the mountains. Then you hid your face, and I was filled with fear.
I cried to you, O Lord. I pleaded for my Lord's sake.
What profit is there in my blood if I go down to the pit? Will the dust praise you or declare your faithfulness?
Hear, O Lord, and have mercy on me. O Lord, be my helper.
You have turned my wailing into dancing. You have put off my sackcloth and clothed me with joy.
Therefore my heart sings to you without ceasing. O Lord my God, I will give you thanks forever.
The second reading is from 2 Corinthians, chapter 8, beginning at the 7th verse. Now, as you excel in everything, in faith, in speech, in knowledge, in utmost eagerness, and in our love for you, so we want you to excel also in this generous undertaking. I do not say this as a command, but I am testing the genuineness of your love against the earnestness of others. For you know the generous act of our Lord Jesus Christ, that though he was rich, yet for your sakes he became poor, so that by his poverty you might become rich. And in this matter I'm giving my advice. It is appropriate for you who began last year not only to do something, but even to desire to do something. Now finish doing it, so that your eagerness may be matched by completing it according to your means. For if your eagerness is there, the gift is acceptable according to what one has, not according to what one does not have. I do not mean that there should be relief for others and pressure on you, but it is a question of a fair balance between your present abundance and their need, so that the abundance may be for your need, in order that there may be a fair balance. As it is written, the one who had much did not have too much, and the one who had little did not have too little. The word of the Lord.
Thanks be to God.
Please stand for the gospel acclamation.
The Holy Gospel according to St. Mark, the 5th chapter, beginning at the 21st verse. Please seat. Please be seated. When Jesus had crossed again in the boat to the other side, a great crowd gathered around him, and he was by the sea. Then one of the leaders of the synagogue, named Jairus, came, and when he saw him, he fell at his feet and begged him repeatedly, "My little daughter is at the point of death. Come and lay your hands on her, so that she may be well and live." And so he went with him. And a large crowd followed him and pressed in on him. Now there was a woman who had been suffering from hemorrhaging for 12 years. She had endured much under many physicians and had spent all that she had, and she was no better, but rather grew worse. She had heard about Jesus and came up from behind him in the crowd and touched his cloak. For she said, "If I but touch his clothes, I will be made well." Immediately her hemorrhage stopped, and she felt in her body that she was healed of her disease. Immediately aware that the power had gone forth from him, Jesus turned about in the crowd and said, "Who touched my clothes?" And his disciples said to him, "You see the crowd is pressing in on you. How can you say, 'Who touched me?'" He looked all around to see who had done it. But the woman, knowing what had happened to her, came in fear and trembling, fell down before him and told him the whole truth. He said to her, "Daughter, your faith has made you well. Go in peace and be healed of your disease." While he was still speaking, some people came from the leader's house to say, "Your daughter is dead. Why trouble the teacher any further?" But overhearing what they said, Jesus said to the leader of the synagogue, "Do not fear, only believe." He allowed no one to follow him except Peter, James, and John, the brother of James. When they came to the house of the leader of the synagogue, he saw a commotion, people weeping and wailing loudly. When he had entered, he said to them, "Why do you make a commotion and weep? The child is not dead but sleeping." And they laughed at him. Then he put them all outside and took the child's father and mother and those who were with them and went in where the child was. He took her by the hand and said to her, "Talitha cum," which means, "Little girl, get up." And immediately the girl got up and began to walk about. She was 12 years of age. And this they were overcome with amazement. He strictly ordered them that no one should know this and told them to give her something to eat. The Gospel of the Lord.
Praise to you, O Christ.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, I'm gonna read it. Okay. Molly Lou Mellon is short and clumsy, has buck teeth, and has a voice that sounds like a bullfrog being squeezed by a boa constrictor. She doesn't mind. Her grandmother has always told her to walk proud, smile big, and sing loud, and she takes that to heart. But then Molly Lou Mellon has to start in a new school. A horrible bully picks on her on the very first day, but Molly Lou Mellon knows just what to do about that. Molly Lou Mellon stood just taller than her dog and was the shortest girl in her first grade. She didn't mind. Her grandma had told her, "Walk as proudly as you can, and the world will look up to you." So she did. Molly Lou Mellon had buck teeth that stuck out so far she could stack pennies on them. She didn't mind. Her grandma had told her, "Smile big and the world will smile right alongside you." So she did. Molly Lou Mellon had a voice that sounded like a bullfrog being squeezed by a boa constrictor. She didn't mind. Her grandma told her, "Sing out clear and strong, and the world will cry tears of joy." So she did. Molly Lou Mellon was often fumble-fingered. start in a new school. On the first day of school, Ronald Durkin called for Shrippo in gym class. When the game started, Molly Llewellyn caught the football, ran under the legs of Ronald Durkin, and scored a touchdown. All the children thought, wow, she's good, and Ronald Durkin felt very foolish. On the second day of school, Ronald Durkin called her bucket-toothed beaver. Molly Llewellyn took out her pennies, stacked 10 high on her teeth, and smiled as big as day. All the children smiled with glee, and Ronald Durkin felt very foolish. On the third day of school, Ronald Durkin said, "You sound like a sick duck. Honk, honk." Molly Llewellyn sang out, "Quack," so clear and strong that it made Ronald Durkin somersault backwards, hit his head, and have to go to the nurse. All the children cried with joy to be free of Ronald Durkin for the rest of the afternoon. And Ronald Durkin felt very foolish. On the fourth day of school, Ronald Durkin said that she'd made the snowflake all wrong. But Molly Llewellyn opened up her paper and revealed the most beautiful snowflake of all. All the children knew and awed, even Ronald. And on the fifth day of school, Ronald Durkin brought Molly Llewellyn the stacking penny for her tooth and smiled at her. This is her grandma. That night, Molly Llewellyn took out a pencil and paper and wrote a letter to her grandma. "Dear Grandma, I wanted to tell you that everything you told me was exactly right. Love, Molly Llewellyn." So she's a little bitty lady.
Very good.
And I got this, I saw these yesterday. We went to Lonnie get this Jesus band-aids. He bumps his head, he gives him a Jesus band-aid.
I love it.
Thank you.
This picture on the slide today reminds me that Christ is our strong defense against all harm and danger, so that we may live and grow in faith, hope, and love. Just 2 weeks ago, Grace and Lars were showered with flower petals by people who only wanted good for them, who came together through faith, full to bursting with hope, and surrounded in love. These petals were dried by one of my very best friends, Dee Marney. She, like the women in our story today, was suffering for several years. She had stage 4 breast cancer. She knew that she would not get to be physically at her children's weddings. She dried flowers for their weddings so that she could be there to shower down her faith, hope, and love. It has been 2 years now since Dee passed. Her daughter Erin and now son-in-law Peyton were married in March. Dee and I met when Erin and Grace were 3. They were in preschool together, and they were a handful. Dee loved children. She was called to teach, she was called to lead, and she was called to claim them as her own. Grace also became one of hers that day. Hence, Dee's flower petals give us a moment with Dee filled with love and healing. You can see it in that picture. It is interesting to me that when reading the gospel today about this healing, it brought thoughts of 2 women, my mother, Gail Reed, and Dee Marney, who have passed. These stories from Jesus' journey and were about healing, not death. However, it seems like both people in the stories or close to death, if not for Jesus. I guess it is my healing that these stories are bringing to me. Both Grace and Aaron's weddings have been a journey that I have missed and felt my mom and Dee walking with me. Healing through their passing has been very hard for me. This is harder to do than I thought it would be. I believe I felt the love that passed from Christ's garment when Royce took me to the Atlanta Botanical Gardens a year after my mom died to celebrate her life. That day was beautiful. I felt it again when friends sat with me in my raw grief and when I was isolating myself, unable to find words to speak. Those friends gave me faith, hope, and love. I could use a little healing right now. Then again, when Joni loved me with understanding for the grief that she had walked through for her own mother's loss. And again, when my dad agreed to officiate both Grace and Aaron's weddings, full of love for both of them. Healing again passed through to me, and I hope through to others at their weddings, as if touching Christ's garment. Jesus said to her, "Daughter, your faith has made you well. Go in peace and be healed of your disease." Healing like prayers does not always happen the way we want it to. We, like the people in Jairus' house, can make a commotion, weeping and wailing loudly, but we cannot control what we cannot control. Christ will walk with us and even go before us to guard our hearts. I truly believe God puts people in your lives to be there. God does this in our churches, in our school lives, in our neighborhoods, in our jobs, in our grocery stores, and in every path we choose to take. When I went off to college, I roomed with a friend that I had had since 6th grade. Her name was Jennifer. And in 1990, way back then, the University of Georgia had a measles outbreak and required vaccinations. All of the students had to go to the health center and be lined up to be vaccinated. Jennifer and I went to go get in line. Jennifer had some tendencies at the time to be a little bit of a hypochondriac. We held each other's hand as we went to get the shots. Then, as we were still lined up, they started telling us the side effects. I was like, oh no, please stop. Jennifer had all of the side effects before we made it back to our dorm room. I believe I was a comfort to Jennifer, and in the end, none of her side effects were long-lasting. Jennifer, I felt on the whole, was a bigger support to me through college. I don't know about you, but when I was at the end of my teens and 20s, I was not always making the best choices. It is easy to look back now and see how God has placed people in my life that have grounded me and made me safer and healthier. We tend to neglect our health in our busy lives. I mean, who loves getting physicals, mammograms, colonoscopies, or shots? Yet when someone we love is diagnosed with a life-changing and/or ending diagnosis, we become scared. We forget that we're not alone. We want something to do to fix it, to make it better. My New Year's resolution this year was to be more intentional about my health, inspired by our Alexia, who is a part of my heart. I am so proud as she keeps moving forward in her health journey. I feel God's love surrounding her like a cloak. My journey has included long-needed doctor's visits. Dad and I did Weight Watchers together. He lost a lot more weight than me. I'm not bitter. I also got new legs. I am a double amputee. I was 1.5 when my legs, when I got my first pair of legs, and they are from a genetic trait that shows up in my family. My parents, Royce, Grace, and Sarah, have spent a lot of time throughout my life going with me to medical appointments. I am so lucky to have them, like Jairus' daughter was, to have him, someone willing to help me fight for my ability to walk about. In my 40s, I was at a mental health training, and the topic was how to help those with chronic pain. It was a course that I needed to take. But in this course, to help other people, I realized that my body, from walking on my legs, had chronic pain and would always for the rest of my life. The pain is not severe, but it is there. It was a hard reality to accept. At first, I was mad. I felt isolated and desperate. Life is not always fair. I think of this lady who has been bleeding for 12 years, and I cannot imagine her desperation. 12 years of being identified as unclean and placed apart. I think of so many groups that feel this way: the homeless, the poor, the LGBTQ+, those with physical illness, minorities, those with mental illness, immigrants, and those with disabilities. I remember being in a wheelchair and being told that I could not come in for my licensure exam that I had spent money and time preparing for because the lady said the testing site was not handicap accessible. I told her to forget I told her I was in a chair, that I would have Royce carry me, or I would crawl in while a local news crew filmed me to take the Georgia state licensure exam. Well, they let me take the test. I had an escort waiting at the door with my name and a sign on it to help me. I think they were just relieved I didn't call the news. My point, though, is in this world, our lives can have moments when we feel unsafe, unwanted, isolated, desperate, and unloved. But the story reminds us that in our desperation, when we reach out for that cloak, Jesus calls us his daughter, his son, his child. Christ is with us even when we forget. Life is unfair, but thank goodness God's grace and love are also unfair. You can't earn it. You can't deserve it. You are a child of God. In these stories I share about Jesus' life, his behavior is so full of love for these people in pain. We all have scars, but don't let your scars define you. Be intentional in your health, physically, emotionally, and spiritually. It is important to live in the light of God's love. As in our psalm today, 30, 11, and 12, you have turned my wailing into dancing. You have put off my sackcloth and clothed me with joy. Therefore, my heart sings to you without ceasing. O Lord, my God, I will give you my thanks forever. We, like this woman and Jairus and his child, can dance. We can dance in faith, hope, and love through God's grace, forgiveness, and healing. Christ is our strong defense against all harm, danger, so that we may live and grow in his grace. I danced all night long at Grace and Lars's wedding. It wasn't pretty dancing, but it was wonderful, and I am so thankful for every moment of that day. I would like to end in prayer. Dear Lord, thank you for loving us, for walking with us, and going before us. Please wrap your healing cloak around your children, old and young. Help us to see you in our lives and to remember we are never alone. Amen.